Okay, for this very technologically impaired version of Dr. OK, let's go straight to and the news. We had SmackDown from Sacramento, California, and we kick it off with a United States title match between LA Knight and Andrade, who just became #1 contender by defeating Carmelo Hayes in their best of 5 series last week. So it was a pretty even match most of the way here, but Andrade was able to land his incredible moonsault from the middle rope onto the floor. And well, Knight did alright as well, as he was able to land a running knee and follow that right up with a neck breaker. But this ended as Knight tried to jump onto the middle turnbuckle 2 times, but he fell off both times. So Andrade tried to take advantage by hitting a dropkick, but Knight was able to sidestep that, putting Andrade very vulnerable for a BFT, and Knight retains the title. It is already his 3rd successful defense. He's won 6 matches in a row and is 11-3 in one-on-one action. Well, for Andrade, even though he became #1 contender, he's actually lost 4 out of his last 5 now, and he's just 7-4 now in one-on-one matches. And backstage, Carmelo Hayes, of course, started taunting Andrade, telling him that he choked. So Andrade quickly had enough of this and pushed him right in the face, which of course incited a brawl, and WWE officials had to break it up, but that will give us a 6th match between these 2 men next week. We did have Giovanni Vinci trying to beat Apollo Crews for a 2nd time. He came out more prepared, but he landed a couple strikes and then a couple nice power slams with Cruz's leg hitting off of the rope, but it was not enough because as he went for a powerbomb, well, Cruz snuck out the back and rolled him up to get a quick pin. So Cruz is now 2-0 against Vinci and just 2-4 overall. But for Vinci, he is now 0-3 in all one-on-one action. We also had a tag match between Bayley and Naomi taking on Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton, where if Bayley or Naomi won, whoever got the pin would become the #1 contender, but if they lost, that person would have to leave SmackDown. So some pretty big stakes there. And Bayley and Naomi worked together well to make sure they wouldn't be leaving SmackDown anytime soon, but things went a little sideways after Naomi hit a springboard enziguri, followed up by Bayley landing a German suplex, but Bayley went for the cover and Naomi pulled her off of the cover since she wants to be the #1 contender. So you would think that would cause some more dissension, but they got back on the same page quickly and even landed a 1D. Wow, nice move there. However, Nia hit a Samoan drop on Bayley, and Naomi had a very impressive pin there, but at the same time, Bayley was also putting Nia's shoulders to the mat. So when they got a 3 count, it wasn't sure which one of them was credited for the pin. So Nick Aldis backstage said, well, it looked like we're just going to have to decide this with a match between Naomi and Bayley next week to determine the actual #1 contender. But for the match itself, those 2 are now 1-1 in traditional tags, but Nia and Tiffany go to 1-1 in all tags. And lastly, we had Kevin Owens and the Street Profits take on the Bloodline, but it was a strange route to get to the Street Profits, as first we had a very long segment with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes speaking in the middle of the field at Georgia Tech's football stadium. And I checked the stats, and sure enough, Roman Reigns claimed that this was his stadium even though he has 0 games played. I don't know, a search for Roman Reigns you would think would be a big deal for Georgia Tech, but I think he's just lying as usual. But Rhodes actually spit some facts saying that his family bled there for generations, so that Atlanta is his city. And he also destroyed Reigns verbally a couple times, calling Reigns a chief with no tribe, and saying that the WWE title was not his to take. So Kevin Owens was asked 2 times how he felt about this segment and Rhodes teaming up with Reigns after all of these years of his dissension with the Bloodline. And just when he was about to tell the WWE Universe, well, Tonga, Loa, and Fatu came out to interrupt him, and sure enough, they brawled 3-on-1, with DIY making the save for KO. But with WWE officials coming out to stop them, Aldis said this would be a 6-man tag match in the main event. But as DIY was coming out to the ring, backstage, the Bloodline attacked them and knocked them out. So KO walked up the ramp and tried to meet them backstage where he could help them out. But the Bloodline came out just before he could do that, and they overwhelmed him yet again. Fortunately, this time the Street Profits were the ones that came to KO's defense, and that set up the actual 6-man tag, which actually we don't have a lot to say about, because at the end of the match, when KO hit a stunner on Tama Tonga, well, Loa pulled KO off of Tonga for the 2nd straight time, so for some reason this was enough for the ref to call for the bell and declare this one a no contest. Why the ref would do that, I have no idea, because this then just made everyone fight at ringside with no rules instead of continuing a match that actually has rules. So ref, what were you thinking? Well, at this point, the Bloodline again overwhelmed the Street Profits and KO, and fortunately, DIY finally recovered to make the save just when KO was about to get triple powerbomb through the announce table, but Fatu intercepted DIY, hitting a super kick on both of them, so KO was back in the ring and it looked like he was going to get hit with a mighty moonsault when Cody Rhodes finally appeared with a steel chair, and he took out both Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa quickly, but Fatu super kicked the chair, knocking it away. Fortunately, however, Rhodes was able to land a Cody Cutter to get him out of the ring and save Owens. But then KO picked up that steel chair, and it looked like he might be thinking about hitting Rhodes with it. But as soon as Rhodes turned around, KO threw down the chair, shook his hand, and they hugged, letting them remain, for one more week at least, as the beat-up buddies. And for the match itself, well, KO and the Street Profits go to 1-0-1 now, and surprisingly, this was actually the first match for this exact combination of Tonga, Loa, and Fatu. Well, beyond the mat for SmackDown, we just have one thing left after all that. We had a really nice training vignette for Chelsea Green as she prepares for a dumpster match against Michin in 2 weeks. And the way Chelsea was training for it, I think she might have a little bit of a problem when that match actually rolls her out. But I guess we'll see. So with that, let's go to STFs. Well, and of course, we start with the Bloodline edition, as this show was all about them. So we start this off as WWE often does, showing people walking into the arena, and this time Jacob Fatu decided to attack 3 different security guards as he went through the metal detectors. So I guess since they are still security instead of just, concession stand workers or whatnot, I guess we'll still just keep this as a 1-month suspension instead of a termination. But of course, that was not all for the Bloodline. As we know, they came out to fight Owens as he was speaking in the ring, so Fatu, Tonga, and Loa will each pick up a fine for that attack. Then, of course, right before the match, as we said, they attacked DIYs, which, of course, stopped the planned match from happening. And so for that reason, we will have to give them a 2-week suspension, one for the attack and another one for stopping a scheduled match. And we will note that after that match, since the ref made a terrible call, we will not give an additional STF to the Bloodline or to anyone else who was out there. KO, the Street Profits, DIY, Rhodes, no one's getting an STF there. That match should have continued. But I guess that's not all for STS, as Andrade did push Carmelo Hayes backstage to start the brawl. Well, Hayes really incited this one, but he didn't look to be imminently attacking him, so Andrade's still going to pick up a fine. We're downgrading this from the usual suspension for a backstage fight, but yeah, he'll have to still get a fine. And lastly, Vinci, of course, kicked Apollo Crews after his match and then landed a brainbuster in the middle of the ring to try to get some retribution for losing a second straight match. So Vinci will also have to pick up a fine. Next week, hopefully, we find out what KO really feels about Rhodes and Reigns teaming up. Rhodes may have been a little late for this one, but at least he showed up at all, which is, of course, more than we can say about Roman Reigns. I'm Dr. O'Kay, reporting on the WWE, where everything is not okay.